We begin today's conference with our first one-on-one session, and for that, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Monimalika Dey, who is the Director of the Center for Early Childhood Education and Development at the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi, and also Associate Professor in its School of Education Studies. She's an alumna of the University of Maryland, USA. She was formerly Assistant Professor at George Mason University, USA. She has supported several states such as Bihar, West Bengal to improve their preschool programs with grants from various agencies including UNICEF and the World Bank. Her empirical research on early stimulation, preschool education, especially inclusion of children with disabilities, teacher education, and collaborations between schools and families has been published in several international journals and books. Dr. Dey, a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. All right.
And our topic of discussion with Dr. Dey is how to design stress-free assessments in the foundational stage. So Dr. Dey, the first question I'd like to ask you is, Dilip also spoke briefly about it. There's a danger of pre-primaries becoming downward extensions of primary schools and beginning not just, learning, but also testing in the typical exam test format in the early years with younger children. So how dangerous is it, and why is it important to have stress-free assessments in the foundational stage? If you can quickly tell us.
Sure. So first of all, I think, this problem of, pushing down the curriculum, and what we have as tests is a bunch of summative tests, one after another. There are two major kinds of assessments, formative assessment and summative assessments. And what we see mostly is a number of summative assessments. So children are under considerable chronic stress, right? And this is what, if you look at the Harvard Center for Developing Child, they label this as toxic stress. It harms their, it sort of elevates the stress hormones. And that leads to sort of problems in terms of their neural development. And you know already that, this is a very sensitive period in terms of their neural development. And I think, the major concern here is we don't quite understand the idea of what is developmentally appropriate practice. Okay? So most of the time we are thinking about, the board exam in class 10 or 12, so let's push this down to this level. And what's very important to understand is that, the journey is just as important as the destination. And, children shouldn't sort of lose their childhood. That's what happens when we keep doing these number of, summative assessment tests. I feel it's almost criminal because we are harming children, really.
Yeah, and the latest NCF 2022 for foundational stage, in fact, lays a lot of importance on having stress-free assessments. If you could quickly highlight,
yes.
one or two aspects from there for us.
So, I think again it's wonderful. The curriculum framework for the foundational years have just been released in October 2022. I think not much dialogue has happened about it, but you're absolutely right that it really kind of captures the spirit of assessment. So there's a lot of emphasis on anecdotal assessment, on the use of checklists, on event sampling, and also it also stresses artifacts. What I find that is missing over there, a couple of things which I feel is useful personally. One is to kind of group these different assessment processes under the umbrella of formative assessment and summative assessment. So that's number one. Number two is, it doesn't mention, for example, it mentions checklists, but it doesn't mention rating scales, or it doesn't mention rubric, is from what I recall. And those are important. So, and again, it's a policy document, so it cannot be, it's not a textbook, so it cannot be comprehensive, and that's quite understandable. Also, what you need to be aware of in terms of the use of artifacts, etc. I think a very important assessment process is the portfolio assessment, which is so critical for the preschool. And how do you bring together evidence from different, different sources in order to create a meaningful sort of, assessment process for the child, something that, even stays with the family, that they treasure, right? So that's one thing. I also, earlier in my table, there was a discussion around Vygotsky. So I want to just mention, what's known as the dynamic assessment, keeping in mind sort of Vygotsky's framework, the dynamic process of assessment, that is when we talk about the zone of proximal distance, right? That is, what is it that the child is currently able to do without any support, and what is it that the child is able to do with support, right? So with support, the child is able to do a lot more, and then we kind of phase out the support, as the child learns. So this process is known as the dynamic process of assessment, and it's especially helpful when you are working with children who have any kind of special needs. And it could be a child with disability, or could be a child from a marginalized community, but anybody who has any kind of special needs.
Okay, also an important aspect, I think, when we're talking about learning experiences, how do you train teachers? As you know, the preschool sector, especially in the Anganwadis, there's hardly any training happening. And even in the private schools, the quality is very diverse. So how do you train teachers and also get parents on board? Yeah. Because there is an obsession about learning outcomes. So how do you get these two important stakeholders also on board with learning assessments, especially in the foundational stage?
Yeah. So absolutely, I think, again, Anganwadis, you cannot blame the Anganwadi worker, because first of all, she's supposed to take, care of 6 different services. But also, if you look at the training period of time, it's just 1 month. And, some of us have been in the universities for donkey's years, trying to learn about these things. So there's absolutely no comparison that way. So I feel there are 2 ways in which we need to approach teacher training. One is, for people like us who have kind of, gone to undergraduate and graduate school, etc., and you have the option of specializing in early childhood. So in B.R. Ambedkar University, we've launched a program. It's a master's program in early childhood education. So, it's one of the first ones. There are a couple that focus on early childhood, but this one focuses specifically on early childhood education. We also have what we call the BVOC program, the Bachelor of Vocational Education, where students are trained in order to open their own centers. And, the approach in these 2 need to be different, because in the other one, there are people who are probably currently working. So they already have a lot of information from the field, and we need to use that in order to help them connect with the theory. Whereas for somebody like me, it's important that, I have perhaps a lot of theory, but what I need is to connect with the field. So this is what we talk about, developing praxis. That's, connecting the theory to the practice. So when that happens, that's kind of ideal for teacher training. And a lot of times, again, assessment is not even a course. If you look at our general education master's program, we actually don't have assessment as a course. We do have it in the early childhood program.
Are you in favor of standardization of, practices, especially for learning assessment for the early years?
So what I would say is you do need to have a vision of where you're going. So in that sense, the goals are needed. But how you go there, there should be flexibility. I mean, you know, all of us have come to this LaliT hotel, but we've all taken different routes and we've reached here. So I think we need to have that flexibility in terms of, you know, allowing children. So what I mean by that is, you know, when we've covered a particular lesson, let's say. So somebody may, you know, I'll just share this story of this teacher. It's actually published. She, you know, she read the story of the 3 little pigs and the wolf, right? The blowing the house down. And the way she was trying to get feedback from the students, whether they've understood it or not, is by engaging in a conversation, asking them to retell the stories. And she felt this particular child, I think his name was Alejandro, and he probably did not really understand, okay, because he did not tell her anything at all. And she had put a few of those, you know, pigs, you know, those dolls in the play corner. And she found one day that he was playing with those 3 little pigs. So then she sat down, started having a conversation with him, and realized that he could actually enact the entire story. So this is where, so the way children express, I mean, you know, you're all probably aware of Howard Gardner's theory of, you know, the multiple intelligence. So that's a framework that's very helpful in helping us think how to get there. Regarding, you know, communication with parents, I think it's extremely, extremely important. And a lot of times, you know, what we find is that when schools say that we are partnering with parents, we are actually, what we are doing is giving them information. That doesn't work, okay? Actually, we've done some research at, you know, both at University of Maryland and later at George Mason University. We developed a model which is known as the process of cultural reciprocity. That is, you know, you try and engage with the parents and try to find out what is it that's important to them. What is it that they know, okay? And then you frame your arguments, you know, the information. Of course, as an expert, you don't give up whatever you know. You have to find a way to communicate. But how you package it, that may differ based on the parents' priorities. And secondly, I think, you know, again, many of us have been working in these fields for many years, or we've been studying the, you know, these subjects for many years. So if we just say, you know, children learn through play, and, you know, but in order to understand that, I've spent, I don't know how many years, and I still feel I have much more to learn, right? So when we are communicating this to parents, it's not going to happen over one session. It has to be given, you know, incrementally in small doses and in a number of ways. So maybe you send a flyer, you have a workshop, you invite parents to come and just observe in your classroom. Then they can see, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, correct.
That's where the aha moments come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll take some 2 questions from the floor now. If I think the lady there, you have a question? Any questions? And yes, can we take the mic to her, please?
Hi, my name is Karuna. I just wanted to ask you is that you talked about developmentally appropriate assessments, but sometimes our developmentally appropriate assessments are not appropriate for big school admissions. How do we handle the expectations and parents' expectations? Because for us, developmentally appropriate assessments are not existent at all. I mean, that age at preschool level, we I mean, assessments are not appropriate at all, okay? What we do is a pictorial representation of what happens, but big school admissions require submission of reports and assessments.
Right. Sorry, I'm not sure I got your question correctly.
So the question is, how do we in ECE handle inappropriately expected assessments?
Demands from the, from the other levels, right.
Yeah.
Sorry? Train the principals, absolutely. So again, I think very true. I would say, there needs to be a change in the ecosystem. So, and assessment is not separate from curriculum. Let's get this straight. I mean, if you look at the literature on assessment, assessment is not something that's separate from the curriculum. Your documentation is separate. And I've seen some, really brilliant assessments done by, different teachers in the US. And, they are even explaining it to parents whose language is very different, who are Spanish-speaking parents or something. But they have all the evidence there. And when you collect, and also the other thing is also, if in terms of collecting the evidence for assessment, if at that point we engage with the parents and discuss it with the parents, then they can also help us to collect those evidence. In terms of transition to the next level, I do agree that, we do need to have awareness campaigns and workshops, etc., for, the primary as well as the elementary. And, I don't have to say this to you, but, the quality of education deteriorates as the children go up. You may have observed this.
Yeah,
and so that is really sad.
I think we have another question there.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the last one. Yeah. Yes, yes, sir. Please go ahead. Sir, your mic.
Mic is not.
You go to put your mic on.
Yeah, you mentioned about Anganwadi workers.
Yeah.
My experience, our experience says that they are not trained, I mean. We always propose to the government that there has to be proper training of pre-school childhood, that they can be equipped how to treat these children. At Dakshinamurti, we do have a Bal Adhyapan Mandir. So we prepare the children, prepare the teachers for preschool education. So that kind of a thing has to be there for Anganwadi workers too. And it should be a part of regulatory things, I mean. This is what my humble suggestion.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I would
Should
agree.
we just take another comment and then you can just sum it up? You need to speak? Okay. Yeah, just, we'll come back to you in our next session, ma'am. Yeah, we have many sessions, so keep your questions all put together. We'll take them up. Arnab, yes, quickly.
Every time I'm in an early years setting, I get a sense that early years relationship with full-fledged schools is very similar to full-fledged schools' relationships with coaching centers. We don't like each other, or sort of send the blame on the other enterprise. And I asked this question to EducationWorld as well. Is there an opportunity to actually bring the early years and the schools on the same platform and say, guys, even if you have to fight, sort this out? And there has to be a clear learning continuum for a child from early years to primary years. And would the NCF actually support that sort of a dialogue?
Yes. Dr. Day, quickly, if you could
So
sum
I'll
up, please.
just respond to the question on Anganwadi and then, your comment. So yes, I completely agree with you that, training is really kind of, very low. But I've also seen very remarkable work being done in Anganwadis. I've worked with UNICEF West Bengal and we created model Anganwadis Shishualaya. In the state of West Bengal, and they had again UNICEF had sponsored the training, so it was much more intense training over a period of a long period of time, and also one of the things to understand, we created these model programs because seeing is believing, and this is where initially the even when we showed videos, the CDPOs said, oh, these must be staged. And only when we took them to the actual model Anganwadi centers, they're like, well, you can't coach the young children, so if this is how they are talking. And I'll give you a small example. This particular child who had transitions to first grade, he, on the first week of class, he told the maths teacher, this is not how you teach maths. Imagine how bold. And she said, how do you teach maths? And he said, you have to give us stuff to play first. We play first and then we do the math. And this teacher was open enough that, she came to visit the Anganwadi to see what he was talking about. Going to the comment, absolutely, I could not agree with you more that, the different, that there is really a lack of understanding of the importance of early childhood years and the pedagogy of this period. So, and I think, again, EducationWorld is, again, a wonderful place to bring the two together. I also feel the NEP policy has done a remarkable job in trying to highlight and clearly articulate the importance of these years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. Thank you for that wonderful interaction.